Hi guys, today's topic is SAP ABAP object-oriented programming. So let's discuss what is OOP. So OOP stand for object-oriented programming. Basically, here we deals with class and object, and if we use the facilities what class and object provide us. So let's discuss object-oriented programming. Break down tasks into objects that have data and function. So here we can simply break many tasks into different tasks, and we can simply uh, as a as a part of that we can call it anywhere where we want in the program. Second point is that this method makes software programming understandable, flexible and reusable. So one of the benefit of OOPS is basically OOPS give you flexibility and reusability of the code. So if you want to create a functionality and that functionality somehow will be used in future, so there we can get benefit of that. Oops. Third topic is object oriented programming was created with simplicity and eloquence in mind. So basically when you do the coding you see that it is totally simple to understand, and the structure which we are going to create for the class is kind of very simple, and anyone can understand and say that yeah, it's doing this stuff. Fourth point is it makes people communicate clearly, exchange information and ideas using a common language, the language of objects. So we the communication between the class and one class to another, and in programming where we use it's totally clear and it's kind of understandable. So that's the thing here. Last point is these objects are made up of their two main characteristics. One is property which we call data, and second one is function which we call behavior of that code. So if you see that this is the basically characteristics. So let's discuss all the characteristics of OOPS. So basically OOPS have five major characteristics. One is data abstraction, second is encapsulation, third is emphasis on data rather than procedure, fourth one is uses of real world entity called object, and fifth one is data privacy and protection. So let's discuss how OOPS is different from a procedural programming approach. So basically procedure oriented programming was a very old programming approach, and there are many things which we cannot do in POP which are allowed in OOPS. So let's see the differences between procedure and or object oriented programming. So POP stand for procedure oriented programming, whereas OOPS stand for object oriented programming. POP focuses on the procedure rather than any other kind of task. So basically we can do only procedure kind of task, whereas it focuses data task rather than procedure. So first let's discuss POP. POP follows top to bottom approach, whereas object oriented follows bottom up fashion in problem solving. Procedure divides a program into smaller part called function or module, and object oriented programming divides a program into smaller part called object. POP functions share global data and data cannot be hidden from each other. So here is the security risk in POP, whereas in object oriented programming function do not share global data. You decide which data is accessible to the other data. So here the security concern is solved. Procedure oriented programming, there is no much kind of data protection, whereas in object oriented programming the data is basically point to the protected data. So whenever you want, you can simply see the protection, like what it's basically pointing into the protected data. You, procedure programming extending functionality and addition of data is tedious and time consuming, whereas in object oriented it is easy to extend functionality and add new data by simply adding new object. Procedure programming have no concept of inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, whereas in object oriented programming there are concept of inheritance, polymorphism, encapsulation, and which is a basic of object oriented programming. So example of programming language which are of procedure is C, Pascal and Fortran, whereas for object oriented programming Java, C++, Python, JavaScript, many there, so on. Nowadays every new program have that object oriented programming approach. And in ABAP, let's see what are the things. So initially SAP was developed and ABAP was basically procedure oriented programming language. However, at the time changes, it shifted into the object oriented programming approach. Hence ABAP now follows all the object oriented plagiarism like objects. As a part of object oriented programming, ABAP uses the concept of inheritance, overloading, overriding, data hiding, and etc. So let us begin by understanding few basic terms of OOPS. So basically some basic terms are object, class, method, member, instance, and institution. So object stand for a basically real world entity that has data and behavior, where class is a complex collection of objects that mainly contain data field and characteristic. Method is basically behavior of an object, kind of function module, whereas member is either the data member or member function of a class. Instance is a synonym of object, usually used as instance of of, of a class. Instantiation is a new object of a class. So whenever you create an object of a class, that we can call instantiation. Object in SAP ABAP. So basically an object in a real world entity that contain data and behavior is called an object, and there are characteristic and behavior which we define to the object, which is basically a replicate of that class. And an object, as mentioned previously, is a blueprint of instance of class. So whatever we have in the class like data member or methods, it automatically gets the instance of that class. For example, in a class, like in a school class, you see there are many students who study at the same class, so everyone have the same book. So basically that student is the object of that class. Similar one example is an employee, a book, a apple tree, all are object of perspective. So how we create class in SAP ABAP? So for creating class in SAP ABAP, we have a object name which is referring to a class name, and then after the type declaration, we have to just use create object and object name. So that's how we instantiate the object. So how we use that class in a report program? Here is the report program where we are defining a class, which class name is class data fair, and here is the definition. In public section we are defining data member and method, and after that we are implementing that class here where we are describing the method, that what that method is doing. And at the start of selection we are simply creating the object, and we are calling that method. So by using this symbol we can call a method. Let's discuss class in SAP ABAP. A class is a complex collection of objects. It contains data member and member method, which we call function, together wrapped into a single entity called object. Classes are where objects are created and defined. We also define and declare function module in a class. We can describe the privacy of class, whether it is private or public. What this means is we can define who can access the particular data, so that we did our function simply. Creating a class in SAP ABAP, first we have to declare the class name, and then after that definition we have to implement it, and in the implementation we will describe all its method. So let's discuss the attributes in SAP ABAP. So attributes are the characteristic of the class. They can have any predefined data type like point, float, or integer, etc. We must declare attributes in class declaration section. So attributes are of two types. One is instance and second is static. Instance basically include instance specific state of object. The changes are different for all objects, and this is declared by data statement. Whereas static includes common state of class and to be shared by all the instance of class. Hence, when we change one state, then all other objects can see the changes declared by the class data statement. So let's discuss what is a method. So method in SAP ABAP is a basically kind of function module. It is behavior of the object in the class of the class. A method can access by characteristic of a class. It contains action to be performed by object that call upon the class. So whenever you create a method, so you get a chance to describe all the characteristics, how that object will behave. So here you declare all the functions, the code function basically. So for declaring a method you have to use a keyword called method, and for ending it with the end method, here is the syntax for that. Accessing attribute and method in SAP ABAP. So basically we can access through two types. First type is here where you see a report is generated with the class paired class, and here there is a data and there is a one method, and as you see this is a public section, this is a protected section, and this is a private section. So basically in the method of implementation it is simply writing the text which is provided. So as you see, whenever we are calling it, creating an object and calling the data fair method, so all the thing is described. But whenever we use the private one and protected one, it will say that you cannot change it's a private or protected. So this is called the protection of a class. So let's see the static attribute. SAP ABAP. So here you see we are declaring a class with a public section, and in the data we are having two data. One is character of 45, one is integer. So in the method of that class we are doing and adding 4 times of that. So let's see what is going on. So first of all we are giving the name of this, and at that time we are initializing the data with 0. After that we are creating two objects. One object is of object 1 and one object is object 2. So when we calling the object, you see both object basically render the data, because both object will basically do the same thing. So first of all, first we will go 1 to 4, then we will go 5 to 8. So what is constructor in SAP ABAP? So constructor are basically special type of method which will initiate when you create an object. So that's how a constructor works. So let's discuss what is the example of this. Constructor will trigger the operation included whenever an object is newly created in execution. So as you see, there is a report. We are declaring a class which have a public section and having only two methods. One method is for writing the method, and second one the constructor. So when we create the object of that thing, you see calling constructor is fired because we have not used any function, and then also we got an. So whenever we create an object, the whatever is in the constructor is fired at the initialization. So let's discuss what is main operator in SAP ABAP. So whenever we define a variable within a method with a different value, that method will be used in redefined value of the variable. So however, if you want to access originally declared value, then you can use me operator. Let us see what is the me operator by the following example. So here you see one report program, same class with public section where there is a data whose values is here. We have a class value and one method, and here is the class implementation where basically we are describing the data, and here we are writing two data. One is me, which is of the class data, and the second one is for the local data. So let's see when you are creating a class and calling the method. So first of all, the class, the local variable will appear after the global variable of the class. So here we are using me operator. So that's all for today's video. Have a nice day. Thank you. Please like and subscribe the video.